Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the 18th chapter in the book of Matthew. In the chapter which precedes it, the 17th chapter, we witness a mountaintop experience and then a valley experience. So the Christian life consists of highs and lows, and the highs occurred on the Mount of Transfiguration. We don't know quite where it was, but we know what it was. It was the unveiled, radiant splendor. His divinity remained veiled in the frame of humanity, but the Peter, John, and James and John were privy to the full manifestation of his visible splendor, his radiant splendor. They saw Moses, they saw Elijah, they heard the voice of the Father, and this is all a wonder to behold. And when they get down to the mountain, there is a crowd immediately to greet them. But at the front and center of this crowd is a man who has a pressing need. The crowd would have been gathered there for curiosity's sake. This man is front and center, and he's kneeling. And what does he say? Verse 15, "Master, have compassion on my son, for he is an epileptic and suffers badly, for he often falls into the fire and often into the water, and I brought him to your disciples, but they were unable to heal him." So we believe that the epilepsy was demonic induced. Not all epileptics are demon possessed, but his son was, and this demon was epileptic. That made him epileptic, and these people are prone to fits and convulsions, uncontrollable physical spasms that can hit them at any given moment. It's really unpredictable and uncontrollable once it gets there. But his safety, his health was in danger because he was falling into fires and into the water. You're not going to be able to swim if you're having an epileptic seizure when you're there. But, he had this need, but the disciples were unable to accommodate. They were unable to supply the demand for the need. They couldn't cast out the demons. They had done so earlier when he commissioned them. In the 10th chapter, he delegated them authority to cast out demons, but here they are unable to do so. It had been so while he was on the mountain, their faith had laxed. They had neglected to pray. They had neglected to maintain a spiritually disciplined life, and that's why they were unable to heal them. And he uses terms he normally reserves for the unbelieving Jews who were not able to recognize divinity present in their midst. He calls them a unbelieving and corrupted generation. He's almost praying for the death, which he predicts will come to pass in the range we're going to be reviewing. Will come that much sooner, and he just says, "Give them to me, I know what to do." And then instantly the demon is cast out, and that's settled. He just says the word and the demon is gone. But then the disciples ask, why were you able to do what we were unable to do? Verse 20, "And Yeshua said to them, because of your unbelief, for truly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it shall move, and no matter shall be impossible for you." Their lack of faith was the reason that the miracle could not manifest. So faith is the key which unlocks and unleashes the potential and power of miracles. So where there is faith, we can faith, just a little bit of faith. A mustard seed is the smallest of the seeds, but from it grows a tree that can provide shade for 10 feet on either side. So from the tiniest seeds grow great things, and if you just cash it into, that's all it takes, and then eventually your faith will be so strong that you can move literal mountains if occasion demanded it. Now, it is implausible to imagine a scenario where moving a mountain would be a legitimate recourse, because miracles are never done for awe or a shock or amazement. They're always and only done for a providential purpose. But so we don't want to rule out that we can move literal mountains through faith. We don't want to impose any limitation on our imagination of what he can and cannot do through us. So it will not be us moving the mountains, but mountains can also be, more people are comfortable translating that as in a figurative lens, the obstacles which come our way, and the obstacles and the oppositions are necessary for us to overcome, and we cannot be overcomers if we do not have these mountains, which are analogous to obstacles and detours in our life, but we can overcome them and we can overwhelm them. Nothing is impossible for you if you have faith. So faith will diminish the possibilities if you have none, but when you have faith, you can unlock and unleash all these fantastic possibilities. Your life will dramatically expand. But this kind does not go out except through prayer and fasting. So this is something the disciples implicitly were not doing. The 9, remember, the 3 are up on the mountaintop with them. They see the transfigured, the full radiant splendor of the Messiah. They see Moses, Elijah. They hear the Father. But the 9 were stuck on the mountains, and they were like a chicken with their head cut off. They did not know what to do when he was not there. They still had a ways to go, and they're ultimately nearing. He's marching to Jerusalem in his death at this stage in the narrative. And while they were staying in Galilee, Yahshua said to them, "The Son of Man is about to be delivered up into the hands of men, and they shall kill him, and the 3rd day he shall be raised up." And they were deeply grieved. What's curious is that they missed the final 2 words, raised up, so his death would be necessary for the resurrection. That means when the news that he had to suffer and bleed and die and be killed and executed, they couldn't fathom that, and they couldn't even get past it. So the resurrection, the foundation of the resurrection is the crucifixion. Without having died, he could have never risen to the grave, and they never killed him. He is eternally alive. But the thought of the man who they knew as a man dying, the one they had followed and called master, was sufficient to just deeply overwhelm them with emotions of grieving. And en route to Capernaum, this is the capital of his ministerial operations. It is a city in the region of Galilee from whence he hailed, and tax collectors for the temple. There was nothing exorbitant about this tax. It was 2 days' wage, 2 drachma tax, and they wanted to know, does he have it? And then when Peter approaches the Messiah, Peter's the one through whom these tax collectors ask, and the Messiah answers, "From whom do the kings of the earth take toil or tax, from their own sons or from the strangers?" Peter said to him, "From the strangers." Joshua said, then the sons are exempt. So the temple was corrupt and it was apostate, but he didn't want to offend anyone. He didn't want to be a stumbling block. So he provided the tax that was meet, 27th verse. "But lest we should cause them to stumble, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you shall find a coin. Take that and give it to them for me and you." So he who is greater than the temple, Matthew 12:6, endorsed the practice of tithing to the temple, and he applauded and praised the poor young widow who gave what little she had, and this was an act of faith and devotion. He knew that the temple was corrupt, but just to go to do it because it was the right thing to do, regardless of the worthiness of where it was spent. He satisfies this tax collector's demand, and this takes us to the 18th chapter, 1st verse lesson itself. "At that time the disciples came to Yahshua, saying, 'Who then is greatest in the kingdom of the heaven?'" So it's curious, they just recently had the announcement of his death and resurrection, and they are so self-centered and concerned. They obviously want him to choose favorite, which of them is going to be the greatest in the heavens. And in the 11th chapter, he says that of men born of women, there were none greater than John the Baptist, but he who is least in the kingdom is greater than him. So greatness is important, but we have to be careful about how we define greatness. Greatness, as the world measures it, is just conquest and consolidation and wealth and dominance and influence and prominence and celebrity, but church as greatness as the church defines it and as he defines it is something dramatically different. It is a paradox. He uses a young child to illustrate his point. "And Yahshua called a young child to him and put him in their midst." So he summons a child to answer their question. He's using him as a visible illustration to communicate the truth that he is about to impart. "And said, 'Truly I say to you, unless you turn and become as little children, you shall by no means enter the kingdom of the heaven.'" So children exist as our model and example, and they look to us to learn, but we also have to look to them to learn. We should mimic and duplicate just the artless, natural believer, that uncompromised trust and dependence and love that we have for the parents. We have to be similarly minded to our Heavenly Father. We have to look at him with awe and wonder and just have the childlike, the virtues of simplicity and uncorruptness. Just the child is not very sophisticated, but sophistication is not necessary to capture the simple message of the plan of salvation, which is easy. You can be too smart. You can circumvent your way around it. You can make all these loopholes, but you cannot be too stupid to understand the plan of salvation. And you have to become as a little child if you want to make it to heaven. That's what we're all after. So we have before us, all around us, children everywhere. We can look to them for the virtues we are to cultivate en route to our heavenly destination. Whoever then humbles himself as this little child is the greatest in the kingdom of the heaven. Children are naturally humble, but the problem is adults are not, and humility is an elusive virtue because once you're aware of it, then you lose it. Humility is not to have a degraded opinion or estimation of ourselves. It is to have an accurate evaluation of ourselves. To reduce it to a slogan, it is dangerous for a man to think more highly of himself than he ought, but it is equally dangerous to not hold himself, to not look at him as God looks at him or her. So humility, once more, this path of self-flagellation is not necessary to cultivate the elusive trait of humility. So humility exists on a golden mean between pride and arrogance and obstinacy and just conceit. And then below that is just this degraded, pessimistic estimation of yourself where you ascribe yourself no worth. So a child, of course, they want to live. They do not feel a child is less likely to be suicidal than a teenager or an adult because they accumulate trauma and stuff. And whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. He is the royal Democrat, and to prove that he evaluates not only here but in the 25th chapter of Matthew, the most accurate evaluation of how we treat him is how we treat the least among us. So true greatness exists in reaching out and exalting and uplifting the last, the lost, the lonely, and the whatever. But to receive a child in his name, so that is not the name is the controlling element, and that is how we receive him. So we are to treat them as he would treat them, and that is how we receive him in his name, and that is how we receive him himself. And we receive him in the sense that he becomes present, working in us and through us and around us, and through people in our surroundings. But whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it is better for him than a millstone shall be hung around his neck, and that he be drowned in the depth of the sea. He lays in no uncertain terms and in unambiguous language the destiny of doom that is deserved for those who corrupt the innocent. So children, they have unlimited potential, but the problem is they're a blank slate, so people can get in and corrupt them, and how many people that end up evil were just not raised correctly. And one of the ways that corruption is infiltrating and being aggressively so little ones is the assertive infiltration of the LGBT agenda into our child's educational program. LGBTs are free to be who they want to be, but there's no right or reason to artificially inject their sinful sickness within the organic process of growth and development. Misery enjoys company, as the adage goes. So all these, transvestite sex offenders going into our children's library, wearing dresses without skirts, and they have male genitalia, stuff like that is where we need to draw the line. Tolerance is all well and good, but tolerance at the same time is the last virtue of a depraved society, for once all the other virtues are exhausted, the only thing left is to ask you to tolerate my sin and my wickedness. So we are dangerously near the precipice, and children are precious. They should not be exposed to that Satanism. That's what Satan wants. But the millstone would have been distinct that he's talking about in this chapter, would have been a millstone reserved for a donkey. This is weightier than one. It was controlling that could domesticate a beast of burden. So to have that around your neck and to be dropped in the middle of the ocean, you're going to have no chance of swimming. You're going to drown. The weight is going to take you there. So even if you try to resist it, you're not going to make it to the shore. And that is what it will be like. You're going to be better off in that scenario than you are if you corrupt children in any way, shape, or form. LGBT is not the only sin. We can corrupt them. And if you beat your wife and you send the message to your children that that stuff is acceptable, that stuff is okay, that stuff is normal, that corrupts them, and you will have to answer to what you do to corrupt them. Woe to the world because of stumbling blocks, for it is necessary that stumbling blocks come, but woe to the man by whom stumbling block comes. Temptation is not a sin. It is not a sin in the sense that if you are tempted, you have not sinned. It's only sinful when we succumb to temptation, but also it is sinful when we tempt others. So the stumbling blocks, these are necessary. We have to refine our faith in the furnace of affliction through trial and tribulation and just the experimental laboratory of life, which is a learning school. So these stumbling blocks are necessary for us to overcome, and with faith we can remove the mountains, the obstacles, the stumbling blocks, everything that is in our way, every temptation which tries to beset us, surround us, overwhelm us, and dominate us. We can overcome that through his power and in his presence. But the shift focus to individual accountability of sin, so we cannot be encouraging others, especially children, to sinful lifestyles. That is sin in itself. But what about our own more deliberate sins? And if your hand or foot causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away from you. It is better for you to enter into life lame or crippled than having 2 hands or 2 feet, to be thrown into the everlasting fire. Now, is he endorsing literal physical mutilation? No, he is not. So if your eyes cause you to lust, get rid of the lust in your heart. Don't poke out your eyes or anything else. If you punch people in the face, just get rid of the heart condition which compels you to be violent, so that he's not telling you to chop off your hands if you have a violent streak, or if your foot turns towards evil and is walking in the path of darkness, in the path of sin, and delighting it. Just reorient your heart. Don't remove your literal feet, but at the same time, it would be better if these members, these extensions, these appendages are the source and cause of your sin, to just get rid of them. But far easier just to get rid of the disposition in our heart. So this is a spiritual matter. The physical world is prone to sin, but it is not sin itself. But if the appendages which each organ can the sins that they can commit are variety, and we don't want to take it that direction. And if your eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you. It is better for you to enter into life with 1 eye rather than having 2 eyes, to be thrown into the fire of Gehenna. Eyes are where we focus. This is where we will pursue that which we seek with our eyes. So the eyes are where we cast our eyes. Matthew 5:22 is where our love and where our affection and where our adoration and where our significance and where our priorities will be. So if we are, if our eyes succumb to the lust of the world, John 2:16, we have to get rid of the lust in the world. We shouldn't poke out our eyes and blind ourselves. But if that's going to be, you have to take that extremity. You have to at least take that into account if you cannot control. So if your eyes are prone to wander to lust or violence or blood or anything else, you might be better off poking them out if you can't control it. But first, try to seek to reorient your heart, because hell is a reality. Fire of Gehenna, he's talking about the fire of hell, and I believe in hell because I believe in him. 70 times he speaks of hell, and this is one of the 70. So the hellbound preachers that get dismissed and ridiculed as cruel or unenlightened, that is an attack on him himself. And many preachers don't talk about hell and don't talk about sin and don't talk about Satan, but this is something their audience needs to know, the apparent warnings and consequences of these things in this place. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I say to you that in the heavens their angels always see the face of my Father who is in the heavens. This is not an endorsement of the erroneous doctrine, the theory of guardian angels, where we each have one, but children are protected by the angels in heaven. They do look after them. He has a special concern for children, and just because children die does not mean that he does not love them. So much that happens in our world is the result of the overlap and interchange of human agency. So these are tests of faith. These are stumbling blocks that may be designed to bring you closer to God. If you lose a child, as horrible and as harrowing as that sounds, that's when you need to turn to God and not despise the one. But don't despise the little ones. There's something wrong. There's something wrong with adults who demean, despise, bully, degrade children. That is not very mature, spiritually or morally or anything else. But even if you do, they have powerful allies watching out for them in the heavens, the angels. So this, the 9th verse takes us to hell. The 10th, we land in heaven. Verse 11, for the Son of Man has come to save what was lost. Because no sinner seeks after God, God therefore must seek after the sinner, and the way he did that was becoming one of us, a human. He entered into the flesh, the Word became flesh, and pitched his tent on men. And his mission and purpose while he walked the earth was to seek and save those who are lost. So salvation was his mission, not judgment, John 3:17, Luke 9:56. But his purpose for coming was the sheep. And this is connected to the metaphorical analogy of shepherds. And the connection between sheep and children are that they are both simple, they are both reliant, they are both docile, they both need direction because they're both prone to wander and go astray. And so the sheep analogy is, in a lot of ways, overlaps with the children that he spoke of in the first 10 verses. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, will he not leave the 99 on the mountains, going to seek the one that is straying? That is what our good shepherd does for us. He leaves the 99 who are secure, the ones who trust, the ones who are not repenting on their repentance, not retreating to a reprobate way, but safely in his fold. He can leave them, and he's going to scour the earth to find the one missing one, because those 99, they're all set and they're all settled, but he really is concerned, gravely so, over, he takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked, Ezekiel 33:11. So why wouldn't he seek out the sinner who needs him? That's what the great physician came. He came not to call the righteous, but sinners unto repentance, Matthew 9:12. And we do stray. We all have this instinct in us that, we want to go our own way and do our own things, and we fancy ourselves free, sovereign beings, but we have agency, but we have no sovereignty. So we have to submit our agency to the sovereign one in order to walk the straight and narrow. So the wandering sheep is one who has deviated to the broad path of destruction, and it's a broad path, so there's going to be a lot of looking, but he's going to scour to the end of the earth to find the one who is lost and return them and restore them and resurrect them. And if he should find it, truly I say to you, he rejoices more over that sheep than over the 99 that did not go astray. There's something precious about a sinner who needs salvation, who is suddenly saved, that is altogether different than one who is already there, one who you didn't lose any sleep over, one who is safely in the fold, one who can be trusted not to wander astray because they know that they have every want, need, and provision where they are. They have the green water, the green grass, and the plentiful waters where they are. They have that and then some when they're in the protective fold. But how much greater joy is it to the shepherd? So, it's easy to think that because there are so many of us that his love could possibly be divided, but he loves each of us because he made every single one of us, and there is no such thing as overwhelming him with sheer numbers. Thus it is not the will of your Father who is in the heaven that one of these little ones should be lost. So he returns to the children. This is after speaking of the sheep. So children are a lot like sheep in that they are simple, they require direction, they are docile, but they also have wayward directions, wayward impulses. They like to go their own way and do their own thing, so we have to restrain them. We have to domesticate them. We have to provide the environment and habitat where they have everything they could possibly want and need, and out there is just danger outside of the protective fold. That's where we don't want to send them. So if you are the one who are tempting and corrupting children, shame on you and then, son. Leave the children alone. Let them figure out their gender, their sexuality, all that stuff. I'm not singling out the LGBTs. If you beat a child, if you rape children especially, stay away from the kids. These are precious and innocent in the sight of the Almighty, and they too must be in our own. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.